Most crocheters never make a wearable top because they are too intimidated to even give it a try. So I set upon a mission to create the simplest crochet women's top pattern that I could think of to give you the confidence to make something that once felt impossible actually achievable. Materials that you're going to want to grab include a size 3 weight yarn, a crochet hook size G6 or 4.25 millimeter, a pair of embroidery scissors, a yarn needle, a measuring tape, stitch markers, and I'm also grabbing my Volare pillow because this project is a bit larger, and the Volare pillow will make sure that I'm not feeling those aches and pains I often get when crocheting for a long time. When you're ready, let's get started. I'm going to be making a large top, so I will begin by chaining 96 stitches or 96 chains. If you want to make a different size, just refer to the chart to find out how many chains you will want to make to begin. Great. For row 1, we will half double crochet in the second chain from our crochet hook, and then just make 1 half double crochet in each chain all the way across. Great, just finished row 1. Let's move on to row 2. We will chain 1, turn our work, and make 1 half double crochet stitch on top of each stitch. Let's go ahead and finish row 2 and then measure to see if our length or width across is the exact dimension that we want it to be. We should end row 2 with a total of 95 stitches if you're making a size large. "94 and 95. This very last stitch is going to be on the top of the chain 2 that we began with. Make sure you count so you know that you're on track and that you didn't add a stitch or accidentally miss a stitch. For every row, we're going to chain 1, turn our work, and make 1 half double crochet stitch in each stitch all the way across. That's what we're doing for this entire panel. In fact, the first 2 panels, the front and the back, all we're doing every row is 1 half double crochet stitch in every stitch all the way across. Let's go ahead and take this opportunity though after row 2 to measure out how wide our project is to make sure we're staying on track. You want to make sure that you're not accidentally making your project too wide or too narrow, especially for a wearable. So grabbing your tape measure, for that size large, we want to make sure that the width is 25.5 inches wide. If you're making a different size, go ahead and refer to the chart to know what size that you need to be looking for. My work lines right up with that 25.5 inch mark. I am on track and I can continue to work every single row, making 1 half double crochet stitch in each stitch. If your stitches are tighter and you are shorter than the width dimension that it wants you to go with, maybe undo your work and use a larger crochet hook to help give you a little bit more space between your stitches, maybe a little bit bigger stitches, so that way your gauge is on track. And if your work is much bigger than what the chart is calling for, try going with a smaller crochet hook to make those stitches tighter. All right, the back panel, we want to go to row 67 for the size large, but we want the front panel to go to row 60. Go ahead and finish both the front and the back panel. Come back here and I'll show you what to do next. Once your 2 panels are done, grab your stitch markers. Lay the shorter panel on top of the longer panel and then make sure that the sides line up. Taking your stitch markers, pin down all 4 corners of the shirt first. Next, we measure. I'm going to start by blocking off the top of the shirt where the collar is. This distance right here that I am measuring is going to join the sections for the shoulders. For the size large that I am making, this measurement will be 7 3/4 inches long on both sides. If you're making a different size shirt than I am, please refer to the chart to get your measurements. Next, we're going to measure the armhole opening. This is the space that we want to leave open so we can attach the sleeve. Once all of our stitch markers have been placed, now you can join the two panels together. Taking your yarn needle, and your scissors, cut a long strand of yarn and thread it through your yarn needle. Knot the yarn in the corner space to attach the yarn to the project. We're going to be using the mattress stitch join underneath both loops to join the two panels together. You'll achieve this by working your yarn needle from the back to the front of one stitch, and then working in the adjacent stitch over on the other panel from the back to the front. Then move back to the first panel, finding the next free stitch that is over and up diagonal. Work your yarn needle from the back to the front of that stitch. And then again, find the adjacent stitch over on the next panel and work your yarn needle from the back to front of that stitch. Repeat this process until you reach your stitch marker. When you've reached the end of your joining section, loop the yarn around your finger to hold some yarn back, and then insert your yarn needle into the same last two stitches that you just made. Twist the loop that's around your finger, and then insert your yarn needle from the back to the front of that loop. You've just created a slip knot. Slowly pull the yarn and guide that loop closed. This is what you would call a tie-off. Then cut your yarn so that way there's enough of a tail left for you to weave in your ends, so about 6 to 8 inches long, and then repeat on the other side of the top. Once the shoulders are done, we move on to working the sides. When working the sides, we will continue working in the mattress join underneath both loops, but instead of working our yarn needle into stitches, we will be working our yarn needle into the sides of rows. Just one join per row, working that yarn needle from the back to the front, and then the back to the front. Before moving on to the next step, which would be making our sleeves, let's go ahead and weave in all of our ends to get them out of the way. Great, once you have finished seaming all of your sides and weaving in all of your ends, go ahead and flip your garment inside out. That way, all of the seams that we just made look really clean and they look really good. Next thing we're going to do is work the sleeves. So taking one side, doesn't matter which one you start on, the yarn that you used for the other part of the garment, keeping that all the same, and your crochet hook, starting with a tail long enough for us to weave in that end. And I'm going to slip stitch into where the join is, where the join ended right here. So right here we see that these two stitches were part of the join. I'm going to take my crochet hook and insert it into that same space right here that had that join over. and slip stitch. Now my yarn is attached to the project. I'm going to chain 1. I am not going to put a stitch in the same space that I made my slip stitch. This is technically still the join, so I'm going to just ignore that. I'm going to actually make my first stitch in the next row over. We are making 1 half double crochet stitch in the side of each row. So yarn over, following that row, coming to the edge of it, and then making a half double crochet stitch. Just like that. Next row, find the edge of it, making a half double crochet stitch. Now honestly, there is a count you can go by just by counting how many rows are between where you joined and the very edge here where you joined at the top. Counting how many rows are on that side, how many rows are on this side. We will want to put a stitch where the join intersects here, and we will want to put a stitch where the join intersects right here on the bottom. So counting all of those rows, or feel free to just work this however it feels most comfortable for you, and then periodically lay your work down to see if it's laying flat the way you want it to. If it's starting to bunch, we're not adding enough stitches. You need to go back and insert a few more stitches. If it's starting to do this ruffle thing, that means you're adding too many stitches and it's cramping. So it's trying to find room for everything. I hope that helps. Go ahead and work 1 half double crochet stitch in the side of every row, and I'll meet you at the top. Great. When we get to the top where we have this joining the 2 panels, we're going to go ahead and just place a stitch between the 2 joins. And we do this to help give the stitches enough space to lay flat. If you skip over this, it might create a tightness there, which will make the whole sleeve kind of bunch in a spot. And then continue around. So I'm going to flip my garment over to make it easier for me, and start working along the other side. Again, finding my rows. Here's a row, oh, there's a row, and just kind of following it up. There we go. Next row, half double crochet in the side. All right, side of this row. And last row. Great. Now we've come to where we started, slip stitch to begin, and right here is the join for the 2 panels. We actually want to make a stitch right between the join of the 2 panels to help round out the bottom of the sleeve. It'll just really help give it a little bit of room. There we go. Now to close round 1, we're actually going to skip where we slip stitched. We're going to find that first half double crochet stitch that we made and slip stitch into the top of that half double crochet to close round 1, making it really smooth, clean finish. All right, to move on to round 2, we will just chain 1 and make 1 half double crochet stitch in every single stitch all the way around. And we will close the round. When we make our way all the way around, we will close round 2 by slip stitching into the top of the very first half double crochet stitch. In fact, that's how we're going to make every round moving on for the sleeve, except for the very last. So I'm making a large. I'm going to work 9 rounds. If you're making a different size top, please refer to the chart to see how many rounds you need to make for your sleeves. And I'll meet up with you at the end of my round 9 to show you what we will do differently for round 10 to just close off the end of the sleeve. Finishing round 9 of my sleeve, slip stitching into the top of that first half double crochet to close off that round. Fabulous. Now the last thing I want to do, my round 10 or whatever the last round is for you, we are just going to slip stitch in each stitch all the way around just to give it a really nice finished look. I'm going to begin by chaining 1 and then making my slip stitches. Use a loose stitch. Try to have your tension be nice and loose. We don't want tight, otherwise the very edge of your sleeve is going to kind of bow inwards. Great. Once the sleeves are complete, we will move on to the next section, which is just putting a border around the collar. We're going to slip stitch into the first space where there's a joint. So this right here is where the two panels were joined together, right here. You can see that these two stitches actually have a joining yarn right here. I'm going to start by attaching my yarn to the project by slip stitching into this space right here, right there. So taking my yarn, my crochet hook, starting with the tail long enough for me to weave in the end of the project. Again, two stitches that are joined together, slip stitching in this stitch to attach the yarn to the project. Great. Chain one, and then just like we did on the edge of the sleeves, we're going to slip stitch in each stitch all the way around. Let's make sure that our tension is really loose here. Again, the tighter the stitch, the more it's going to cause bunching to happen, and we don't want that. We just want this appeal, this cleaned up, closed look that just finishes this section beautifully. I've made my way all the way around. Fabulous. All right, I think I've gone to all the stitches, ending here in that last stitch that was the other side of that join. Gonna cross over so I can slip stitch into the very first slip stitch that I made for this whole border and close that off. Great, grabbing my scissors, cutting, and tying off. Last thing we have to do is the border for the very bottom of the shirt to clean this up as well. Last thing we got to do to finish off this top is to actually work the border on the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to twist the project so that way I can set it up to most easily work onto it. Now, because we're working the very bottom or the first row off of the foundation row chain, we have all these loops on the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and begin by first chaining one, so I set myself up. I'm going to be working that one loop off the bottom, or if you work on your foundation row differently, I'm just working off of that very edge piece. For me, it's that one loop, or it might be two loops. Either way, I want my slip stitches to be coming right off the bottom of the work and not laying on the front or on the top. And I'm just going to continue to work this slip stitch all along this first panel. And I will meet you at this next section at the very edge before we move on to the back panel. I'll meet you right here. Last stitch on the front panel. Now I'm going to start working along this side edge here for the back panel. I'm going to instantly move to the next stitch over and keep slip stitching, just making one slip stitch in the side of each row, or just kind of feel it out. There's no set. I would definitely just slip stitch and lay flat. Does it look good? Yes, keep going. It doesn't have to be complicated. You don't have to have a set number of stitches here. Just continue to work a slip stitch along the side. And again, continually like set it down, check it. How does it look? We're okay. Okay, at this edge, I am looking for either the one loop on the end for me, or you might have two loops on the end. And slip stitch, chain one, and slip stitch in that same stitch again. This is going to help you with that pointy corner. It's going to help you to get around that corner. And continue making one slip stitch on the edge of that foundation row, just to make that edge of the work look really clean and really pretty. All right, at the edge here, finishing off that last stitch for this bigger chunk, I have now reached where I started. See, there's my tail from where I started. Slip stitch into that first slip stitch. Yeah, if you need to use your claw to get in there, use whatever you need. My first slip stitch was apparently on the tighter side. And that's it. And that closes off that border. Oh, look at how pretty that border looks. Just cleans everything up. So nice. All right, so tying off. And then guys, all we have left to do is weave in all these new tails and you're done. You did a fantastic job. I hope you love it.